My boyfriend bought an engagement ring with my money and proposed to another girl, then came to me with the same ring and flowers. So this happened just a few months ago, and it still feels kind of unreal. I was on a train heading to Chicago to visit my sister. Her name's Julia. She's 2 years older than me, married, has a little boy, and recently bought a house in the suburbs. We hadn't seen each other since Christmas, so I was looking forward to some good food, kid time, and wine-fueled sister gossip. I'm Emma, by the way. I'm 28 and I work in logistics for a food distribution company, so most of my life is spreadsheets, delayed trucks, and arguing with warehouse managers over damaged pallets. Nothing glamorous, but it keeps my bills paid and fridge stocked. Anyway, the train was supposed to be a straight shot, and I even splurged for a window seat. About halfway through Pennsylvania, we suddenly came to a dead stop. No announcements for a while. Then finally the conductor said something about a freight accident up ahead, and that we'd be delayed for at least a few hours. At first I thought, okay, fine, I'll just keep reading. But then they made us all get off the train because apparently the tracks were going to be shut down for who knows how long. They loaded us onto these old rental buses that rattled like bones and took us to the nearest town. It wasn't even a town, really. Just a handful of buildings, like the universe copy-pasted one block and hit Ctrl+V until it had a population. I think the sign said we were in some place called Clearfield, though I might be misremembering. All I know is there was one motel, one gas station, and one bar with a flickering neon sign that read simply Rick's. The station attendant told us the train wouldn't be back up until morning, so we were stuck for the night. I checked into the only motel available, a low-roof place with buzzing lights and a carpet that looked like it had been cleaned maybe once during the Obama administration. I tried calling my sister, but service was spotty and the motel Wi-Fi didn't reach my room, so I gave up and decided to check out the bar. Rick's was exactly what you'd imagine: dim lighting, a jukebox in the corner that only played classic rock, and about 6 locals nursing beers like it was their nightly ritual. I ordered a whiskey sour and tried to keep to myself, scrolling through cached Instagram posts like it would somehow reconnect me to civilization. That's when I noticed the guy at the far end of the bar staring at me. Not in a creepy way, more like he was trying to decide if I was real. He had this wild mop of light blonde hair, like he'd just walked through a wind tunnel and decided to keep it that way. He wore an old denim jacket with fraying seams and a pair of boots that had clearly walked through a lot more than just city streets. When he came over, he didn't open with, "Hey," or "Can I buy you a drink?" Instead, he said, "You don't look like you're from here." Which means you either broke down or you're lost. Which one is it? I laughed because it was such a weird opener. Neither. Train stopped. Freight accident, apparently. He nodded like that explained everything. Yeah, those happen a lot. Tracks around here are ancient. You from Chicago? No, just visiting. I live in Jersey. Logistics. He raised an eyebrow. Ah, the spreadsheet people. I smiled. And you? You look like you walked out of a Montana catalog. He leaned against the bar and signaled the bartender for another beer. Used to be corporate. Marketing firm in Philly. Got tired of it. Sold everything. Moved out here. Started fixing up old cabins and renting them out to tourists. Seriously? He took a sip of his beer. Yeah. Wasn't making anything real back then. Now, at least when I build something, it stays built. You ever lay down hardwood flooring? It's hell on your knees, but damn satisfying. That was how I met Logan. We ended up talking for 2 hours. He told me about this tiny house he was building with his own 2 hands, how he lived off the grid half the time, and how he'd rather eat canned beans in the woods than sit through another budget meeting in a glass tower. I told him about my job, the absurd world of food shipping logistics, and how I'd once rerouted an entire pallet of frozen peas because a truck driver refused to go through Jersey tolls. I don't know what it was about that night. Maybe it was the strange setting, the forced stop in the middle of nowhere, or the fact that we were both a little buzzed and displaced from our usual lives. But talking to him felt easy, natural, like we'd already known each other in some other life. He wasn't trying to impress me. He didn't ask for my number or make weird small talk. We just talked. Eventually, the bartender told us it was last call. Logan offered to walk me back to the motel, and I said sure. The streets were dead silent, like the whole town had been tucked in for the night. We walked side by side, not touching, not rushing, just moving through the night like it was holding something sacred. When we got to my door, he nodded toward the parking lot. My truck's out back. I keep tools in there. If the train's not running tomorrow and you want to kill time, I'll be at the old hardware store fixing up a sink. You're welcome to stop by. I smiled, not quite sure if I would. Thanks. For tonight. He shrugged. Just glad to meet someone who doesn't think I'm crazy for leaving it all behind. I stood there for a second longer after he left, just watching the empty lot and the orange haze of the motel sign flickering above. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept thinking about that guy with wild hair and a carpenter's hands who said he wanted to build something real. The next morning the train was back up. They gave us an hour to grab our stuff, and I sat on the edge of the motel bed wondering if I should go find Logan. I didn't. I got on the train. I rode it all the way to Chicago, but I haven't stopped thinking about that night since. I ended up getting to Chicago later than planned, and Julia teased me for showing up in the middle of the night like some train-hopping fugitive. But I couldn't stop thinking about Logan the entire time I was at her place. Not in some dramatic, swept-off-my-feet kind of way. More like he lingered in the corners of my thoughts when things went quiet. His voice, the way he talked about building things, even the shape of his hands when he mimed tightening a bolt, it just stuck with me. The morning after I got home from the trip, I found a text from an unknown number. It just said, "Hope you made it to Chicago in one piece. Pretty sure the train people missed their true calling as chaos engineers. Logan." I read it twice before responding, then sat on the couch with my coffee debating whether to reply like a normal person or do what I always do and overthink it until the moment passes. I texted back, "I survived. No limbs lost. Your bar recommendation gets a B- for lighting, but an A+ for unexpected company." He responded instantly, "Lighting's half dead on purpose. That way no one notices the dent in the jukebox or the fact that half the beer taps don't work." That kicked off a few days of texting. Nothing heavy, just banter. He had this way of being funny without trying too hard, and every now and then he'd drop something out of nowhere that stuck with me for hours. At one point I mentioned how much I hated Mondays, and he sent back, "Imagine Mondays being optional. That's the life I'm chasing." A week later, when I got back to Jersey, he texted, "If you're ever bored of spreadsheets and rerouted peas, I'm still fixing sinks in the same busted building." I laughed when I read it, then surprised myself by typing out, "Actually, I could use a break from civilization. You free next weekend?" We met up the following Saturday. I drove into Clearfield like I knew where I was going, even though I had to pull over twice to check GPS. He was waiting in front of a dusty little hardware store with an old thermos in his hand and that same messy blonde hair like he'd just walked out of a wind tunnel again. When he saw me, he gave this quick, crooked smile that made my stomach do something I wasn't prepared for. He took me through the space he was working on, some kind of old hunting lodge he was turning into a short-term rental. It smelled like sawdust and weathered wood, and he'd already torn out half the flooring in the front room. He handed me a pair of gloves without asking and showed me how to pull up old nails using this weird angled pry bar I'd never touched in my life. I think he expected me to say no, but I jumped in. Not because I wanted to impress him or whatever, but because it felt good to do something real with my hands for once. We talked while we worked. He told me he didn't get the grant job he'd applied for with a local conservation group. Said it sucked, but he had other ideas. He mentioned a buddy who wanted to start a furniture business using reclaimed wood, another guy who was trying to pitch a local hiking app and needed help mapping trails. He talked like someone who saw possibility in everything, like the world was just a long series of experiments waiting to be tried. I listened, nodded along, but part of me stayed cautious. I'd dated enough guys with big dreams and no traction to know how that story usually ended. Logan was different, though. He didn't have that manic, "I'm gonna be huge" energy. He was calm, thoughtful, like he really meant it when he said he was building a life that mattered more to him than a paycheck. That night, we sat on the porch of the lodge, passing his thermos back and forth. It was filled with some god-awful instant coffee and bourbon concoction he called Clearfield Rocket Fuel. The stars were out in full force, and I was pretty sure I hadn't seen a sky that clear in years. He asked me what my life was like back home, and I told him the truth. Early mornings, supply chain headaches, tired dinners eaten standing over the sink. He nodded like he understood. Then he said, "You ever wonder what it would take to just reroute?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked out at the trees and thought about all the times I'd stayed on course just because it was the course. He didn't press me, just leaned back in the chair and let the silence hang between us like something that didn't need to be filled. When I got back to my motel that night, I found a text from him waiting. "You didn't flinch at splinters or broken tiles. That's rare. You're welcome back anytime." I didn't know what this was yet. I wasn't calling it anything. But I liked that he noticed things, that he didn't force anything, that he asked questions like rerouting wasn't crazy but natural. I went to bed with the smell of sawdust still on my shirt and that text sitting on my screen. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was just passing through. It happened gradually, the way most problems do. By the time I realized what was really going on, it already felt too complicated to unwind. 6 months after that weekend in Clearfield, Logan moved into my apartment in Jersey. It was supposed to be temporary, just until he figured out his next move, and honestly, it felt like the natural next step. His lease was up, my place was bigger, and we'd been spending most nights together anyway. We packed up his things in a single day, Most of it was tools, boxes of old books, a mattress he didn't even bother bringing. And he loaded what little he had into the back of his beat-up Toyota pickup and followed me back down the turnpike. At first, it was good. Better than good. The first few weeks felt like this hazy mix of adventure and comfort. He made us breakfast almost every morning, scrambled eggs with weird spices, French press coffee that tasted like motor oil but grew on me. And he'd play old records on my dusty stereo while we worked in parallel silence. Me at my laptop scheduling freight deliveries, and him sketching out designs for a tiny home project he swore was going to blow up once they finalized the lot purchase. We split the bills evenly at the start. Rent, utilities, groceries. He Venmo'd me like clockwork. And whenever I got home late from work, he'd be there on the couch with dinner going, or at least something halfway ready. I remember thinking, maybe I got lucky this time. Maybe Logan was the one guy who could dream big and still be grounded. But somewhere around the third month, the payments started coming late. The first time, he said the startup he was helping build had a payment delay with their seed funding and he'd cover it as soon as things cleared up. He sounded frustrated, not evasive, so I let it go. Then the next month came, and the money didn't. He sent me $20 for groceries and said the rest was coming, that a freelance web design gig was about to pay out. When I pushed, he got quiet, then came back with that crooked half smile and said, "I know it looks bad, but I swear, everything is about to change." I wanted to believe him. I really did. He'd say things like, "We're on the verge of signing this huge client," or "There was a glitch in the payment processor," or my personal favorite, "I just need to ride out this month, and then you won't have to worry about rent ever again." It always sounded like he was just one step away from turning the corner, like he was mid-sprint towards something that only needed time and patience. But rent still came due on the 1st, and every time it did, I found myself pulling more and more from my savings just to keep things from slipping. I stopped ordering lunch at work, canceled my gym membership, told myself it was temporary, that Logan just needed one break. The excuses never really changed, just the details. One week, it was the business partner ghosting him. The next, it was a shipment of reclaimed wood that didn't come through for a project. He'd paced the living room talking on the phone to people I never met, throwing around words like scalability and capital burn, making it all sound like he was one pitch away from fixing everything. But nothing ever actually happened. I started noticing other things too. The mornings got slower. He stopped waking up before me, stopped cooking breakfast, stopped bothering with anything that looked like effort. Some days I'd come home, and he'd still be in the same clothes he was wearing when I left. He'd be on the couch watching videos about van conversions or minimalist living, and he'd look up and say something like, "Babe, I figured out a new layout for the tiny home kitchen. You have to see this." Meanwhile, I was the one covering 2/3 of our bills and trying not to snap every time he brought up vision like it was a form of currency. I didn't say anything at first. I told myself it wasn't worth fighting over money when everything else felt fine. But it didn't feel fine. Not really. Not when I was staying late at work to avoid going home. Not when I stopped inviting friends over because I didn't want to answer questions about why my boyfriend wasn't working. Not when I caught myself calculating exactly how long I could keep covering both shares of rent before it tanked my credit. One night, after a particularly rough day at work, I came home to find Logan in the kitchen making grilled cheese, like it was some kind of romantic gesture. He looked proud, almost triumphant, like this was enough to reset everything. I sat down, picked at the sandwich, and said, "Logan, I need you to start paying rent again. I can't keep covering for both of us." He sighed, rubbed his face, and gave me that tired smile again. I know. I've got this meeting next week. If it goes well, it changes everything." That was the third meeting he'd mentioned that month. And I think in that moment, something inside me shifted. It wasn't just the rent. It was the way he looked at me like I should be proud of him for trying. Like effort was the same as outcome. I didn't say anything else that night. Just finished the sandwich and cleaned the dishes while he sat on the couch watching a video about sustainable bamboo flooring. And I realized, for the first time since he moved in, that maybe Logan hadn't left the corporate world to start something real. Maybe he'd left because the real world required more from him than he was willing to give. By the time winter rolled around, I was working 7 days a week. I picked up a weekend contract doing supply chain audits for a local distributor just to make ends meet. It wasn't glamorous, cold warehouse floors, secondhand coffee, endless inventory checks, but the money was decent, and at that point I didn't have the luxury of saying no to anything that paid. Monday to Friday, I was at my full-time job managing vendor schedules and troubleshooting late shipments, and Saturday and Sunday, I was buried in spreadsheets and freight logs for a company that didn't even remember my name. Meanwhile, Logan had started using the word unplugged to describe his new routine. He said it with this proud, almost philosophical air, like he was tapping into some deeper wisdom the rest of us were too busy to see. While I was crawling out of bed at 6 to catch the early shift, he'd still be asleep. I'd come back 8, 9 hours later, and he'd be doing yoga on the living room rug or reading a book about eco-housing. He told me he needed to stay off his phone more, to be present, to block out the noise. And maybe that would have sounded noble if I hadn't also been paying his half of the rent for the 4th month in a row. Still, he was sweet about it in his own way. He'd rub my shoulders at night and tell me I was amazing. He made me tea when I looked dead behind the eyes. He'd run his fingers through my hair and whisper, "I don't deserve you, but I'm going to make it up to you. I promise. Just give me time." He always said that with such conviction that for a while, I believed it. I wanted to believe it. It was easier to pretend that things would get better soon than to face the reality that I was drowning in work while the person I lived with spent his afternoons sketching treehouse designs in a notebook no one was asking for. I think the shift really started with Jade. She's my oldest friend, the kind of person who never sugarcoats anything, which is exactly why I trust her. We met for drinks one Friday after work, and I must have looked like hell because the first thing she said was, "You look like a ghost who pays taxes." We talked for a while, mostly about work, family, the usual, and I finally mentioned that Logan hadn't picked up a paying gig in months. I tried to make it sound casual, like it wasn't a big deal, just a temporary rough patch. I told her how he kept saying he was on the verge of something big, how he was meeting with a potential investor next week, how he was taking time to focus on the bigger picture. Jade just looked at me, tilted her head, and said, "You know you're basically sponsoring this guy's lifestyle, right?" I laughed, mostly because I didn't know what else to do. But something about the word stuck. Sponsoring. Like I was a foundation funding a passion project that had no end date. She didn't press the issue. She just said, "Just make sure you're not the only one showing up." That's all. I couldn't stop thinking about that on the drive home. And when I walked into the apartment, the lights were dim, candles were lit, and Logan was sautéing vegetables in a pan like we were in some kind of cooking show. He poured me a glass of wine and pulled out a chair at the table. "You work too hard," he said, setting down the plate like it was an offering. "Tonight you rest." It would have been perfect if I hadn't been the one who'd paid for the groceries. If I hadn't looked at my bank account that morning and felt sick. If I hadn't just worked 30 days straight without a break. I sat there chewing roasted squash while Logan talked about a new business idea involving sustainable garden kits and said, "I think this could really be the one." That night, when he was asleep, I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my laptop. I looked at my budget, calculated how many more weeks I could do this before I fell behind on bills. I stared at the numbers until they stopped making sense. And for the first time, I let myself ask the question I'd been avoiding for months. What if nothing changes? What if this is it? What if I'm just the support beam propping up a dream that never had a blueprint? I didn't have an answer, but I closed the laptop and lay down beside him, wide awake, while he snored softly and mumbled something about cedar beams and skylights. The first charge showed up on my statement as something small. $9 and some change at a bar I didn't recognize, a place in Hoboken I hadn't been to in years. At first I thought maybe it was a mistake, maybe I'd used Apple Pay and forgotten, but something about it didn't sit right. I pulled up the rest of the transaction history and found more, tiny charges at gas stations, takeout, an online game purchase, and 2 rideshare receipts on nights I knew I had been working late. All from the same card I kept in my bag, the one Logan knew I rarely used except for emergencies. When I asked him about it, he blinked like he was surprised I'd even noticed. "Oh, that?" he said, casually, like we were talking about forgetting to buy milk. "I just needed to grab a few things. I was going to tell you, but you've been so stressed lately. I figured it wasn't worth bothering you." I stared at him, stunned, waiting for the rest of the sentence, for an apology or an offer to pay me back, anything that showed even a flicker of responsibility. But he just shrugged and walked off to the kitchen like it was nothing. Later that night, he tried to smooth it over with a back rub and a soft, "You're incredible, you know that?" I don't say it enough. But I didn't feel flattered. I felt like I was being handled. It wasn't just the money. It was everything around it. Every time I brought up something serious, like our future, he deflected like it was a bad joke. One night I asked him, gently, if he ever thought about marriage, about settling down with me long term. He was sitting on the couch, playing some indie video game on the TV, and he froze like I'd just insulted his mother. "What are you talking about?" he said without looking at me. "We already have a great relationship. Why would we mess that up with labels?" I didn't say anything at first. I just watched him as he went back to his game like the conversation hadn't even happened. I didn't need a ring tomorrow. I wasn't trying to plan a wedding. I just wanted to know if we were building something together or if I was building alone. That was the beginning of the unraveling, even if I didn't fully see it at the time. After that night, Logan's behavior changed in this weird, quiet way. He started disappearing for hours at a time, sometimes whole days. He'd tell me he was meeting with potential clients, working on a prototype, brainstorming with a buddy out of town. When he got back, he'd be in a good mood, buzzing with energy. He'd toss around phrases like big picture and game changer, but when I asked for specifics, the details were always fuzzy. One Tuesday, I came home from work and his backpack was gone, but his laptop was still sitting on the kitchen counter. A few hours later, he texted me saying he was out with a client who might fund the tiny house expansion idea. When I asked where, he just said, "You wouldn't know the place." When I pushed, he stopped replying for the rest of the night. What bothered me the most wasn't the disappearing. It was the fact that he looked happy, genuinely happy, lighter on his feet, smiling in the mornings like something good was happening, but only to him, and whatever it was, I wasn't part of it. He'd wake up before me some days, make himself coffee, even put on cologne, which he never used to do unless we were going out. I'd ask where he was headed, and he'd say something vague like, "Just chasing something down. I'll tell you more when it's solid." That line, "when it's solid," became his excuse for everything. His way of buying more time without giving me anything real to hold on to. I tried not to jump to conclusions. I told myself I was tired, overworked, maybe just seeing things that weren't there. But the truth was, I felt like a stranger in my own home. Like he'd already started living another life and was just waiting for the right moment to leave this one behind. The worst part was, I wasn't even sure he'd see that as betrayal. To him, maybe it would just be moving forward. But to me, it felt like I was standing in a room that used to feel full, and now I was the only one left talking. It was a Thursday when Melanie texted me out of the blue and asked if I wanted to join her and some friends for dinner. I hadn't seen her in a while. She and I used to work together before she switched apartments, and honestly, I didn't want to go. I was exhausted, barely holding it together between my full-time job, weekend shifts, and pretending my personal life wasn't crumbling under the weight of unpaid rent and vague promises. But something about her message felt insistent, like maybe I needed to show up for this one. So I said yes. The dinner was at this casual Italian place in Hoboken, one of those spots with brick walls, low lights, and too loud music. There were 6 of us at the table. I only really knew Melanie, but I made polite conversation and let the wine loosen me up just enough to fake a smile. For a little while, it almost worked. We talked about work, travel, someone's dog that got famous on TikTok. I laughed at the right moments, nodded along, even managed to forget about Logan for maybe 20 minutes. Then Melanie's boyfriend, Mark, I think, said something that snapped me back so hard I felt it in my chest. "Wait," he said, looking at me. "Is your boyfriend named Logan?" I blinked, confused, my fork paused in midair. "Yeah, what?" He leaned back in his chair, totally casual. "That's wild. I saw him yesterday near Journal Square. Thought I recognized him. He was with some girl, tall, dark hair, real done up. They looked super close. I assumed it was his fiancée or something." She had her hand on his chest, showing off a ring. My stomach dropped. "What?" Mark didn't notice my voice shift. "Yeah, I mean, I don't know him, but the way they were talking, it wasn't subtle. He kissed her before they got into the car. I figured maybe he wasn't your boyfriend anymore." The whole table went quiet. I looked at Melanie, who was already pulling out her phone like she knew exactly where this was going. She opened Instagram and typed something quickly, then turned the screen toward me. The profile said Daria Torres. The picture was of a woman in a flowy white dress, standing next to Logan in a park I recognized from one of the photos he had printed on our fridge. His arms were around her. She was grinning at the camera, left hand extended, a diamond ring catching the light. The caption read, "I said yes. I can't believe I'm marrying my soulmate." For a moment, I just stared at the screen, trying to understand what I was looking at. I thought maybe it was a joke, a mistake. Maybe Logan had a twin he never told me about. But it was him. That messy blonde hair. That stupid denim jacket. That same half-smile he used when he didn't want to answer a question. I felt the blood drain from my face. I excused myself from the table, walked into the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the closed toilet seat with my phone shaking in my hand. I opened the banking app. We had a shared account he convinced me to open a few months back, just for groceries and shared stuff. I hadn't looked at it in weeks, mostly because it was always me putting money in. I scrolled through the transactions, each one digging the knife in deeper. A purchase for a boutique jeweler 2 weeks ago, $2,811.06. My card, my money, that ring on Daria's hand. I paid for it. I couldn't breathe. I wasn't even angry yet, just stunned. Like my brain was short-circuiting trying to piece together the past few months in light of this. All the disappearances, the sudden mood changes, the cologne, the weird excuses. All of it now made sense in the most twisted way. I sat there for what felt like 20 minutes before Melanie came into the bathroom and gently knocked. "Emma," she said softly, "can I come in?" I unlocked the door. She stepped inside and shut it behind her. I didn't even look at her. I just said, he bought her ring with my money. She didn't say anything, just stood there with me while I tried to keep my hands from shaking. That was the moment everything broke open. Not in a dramatic, yelling, throwing things kind of way, but in the quiet, hollow realization that I had been living with a stranger. A stranger who looked me in the eye every day and told me he loved me while planning a life with someone else behind my back. And worst of all, he made me pay for it. He came home around 8 that night, whistling. That's what hit me first. He was whistling. Some old tune he always hummed when he was in a good mood, like nothing was wrong in the world. He dropped his keys on the counter, kicked off his boots, and walked into the kitchen like we were just another couple at the end of a normal day. I was sitting at the table with the lights low, my laptop open in front of me, bank statements pulled up in one tab, Daria's Instagram profile in the other. He didn't even look surprised to see me waiting. "Hey babe," he said, heading straight for the fridge. "You eat already?" "I was thinking about grabbing something from that Thai place you like." "You want anything?" I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just said, "You used my card to buy her ring." He paused for half a second, one hand on the fridge handle, then slowly closed it and turned to face me. His face was calm, unreadable. He didn't ask what I meant. He didn't pretend not to understand. He just stood there, looking at me like I was being dramatic. "I saw the charge," I said louder now. "I saw the pictures, Logan. I know everything." He let out a long breath, then tilted his head slightly, like he was bored. "You weren't supposed to see that yet." That was it. That's what he said. I stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. "That's all you have to say? You used me. You lied to me. You lived in my apartment, ate my food, let me pay your bills, and then you bought a ring for someone else with my money." He raised his eyebrows just a little, almost like he was impressed. Then he walked a few steps closer, leaned his shoulder against the doorframe, and gave me that slow, irritating half-smile. "You didn't think you were going to get the ring, did you?" he said quietly. "Come on, Emma. You're the backup plan. You're an option for people who've already given up." For a second, I couldn't move. His voice was calm, his expression steady, like he was just stating a fact, like he wasn't tearing me apart from the inside out. And then I moved. I stepped forward and punched him, open hand, straight to the chest. Not hard enough to hurt him, but hard enough to make him take a step back. His smile dropped for the first time, and I felt this surge of something sharp and hot fill my throat. "Get out," I said. My voice was shaking, but I didn't care. "Get your stuff and get the hell out of my apartment." He stood there, blinking like he couldn't quite believe I'd touched him. Then he let out a short laugh, turned around, and walked into the bedroom. I followed him, watched him pack the few clothes he had into a bag without saying a word. He tried to talk once, some half-hearted explanation I didn't even let him finish. I pointed to the door and said it again, louder this time. "Get out." He left 10 minutes later, and I locked the door behind him. I stood there for a long time, forehead pressed against the cool wood, listening to my own breath until it finally slowed. The apartment was silent. My chest hurt. My hands were still trembling. But he was gone. The next morning, I woke up hoping, for a split second, that it had all been a nightmare. That I hadn't actually thrown him out. That I hadn't found out about Daria, about the ring, about all of it. That maybe I was still stuck in that half-life where I worked every day while he played pretend at building a future. But then I saw the empty side of the closet, the faint din on the floor where his boots usually sat, and I remembered everything. I made coffee and opened my laptop again. I needed to clean up the mess. I needed to close every account he had access to. I went through every linked service, changed passwords, revoked access, started canceling anything that looked unfamiliar or suspicious. That's when the real damage came into focus. He left behind over $5,000 in charges. 5,417 to be exact. Restaurants I'd never been to. Subscriptions I'd never signed up for. Hotel charges in places he told me he was meeting clients. Random retail purchases. An upscale sneaker store. Some home goods boutique in Soho. Things that made no sense and things that, unfortunately, were technically legal. He'd been an authorized user on my credit card. I'd added him back when things felt good, when I believed we were building something together and thought it would make shared expenses easier. What it made easier was stealing from me in slow motion, right under my nose. Most of the transactions couldn't be disputed. The card company told me the same thing over and over again. "We're sorry, but as an authorized user, he had full access and the ability to make purchases. We recommend removing him and closing the account." I sat there, listening to that recorded voice repeat itself while I stared at the balance, my stomach in knots. I had savings, but not enough to erase it. Not all at once. It was going to follow me for a while. That was the part that stung the most, not just what he did, but that he walked away without consequence. He got a fiancé. I got a credit bill. I changed the locks that afternoon. Called a guy from down the street who showed up with a drill and a tired smile. Didn't ask any questions when I told him I needed everything replaced immediately. I threw out the rest of Logan's things. A pair of socks under the bed. That flannel shirt he always left draped over the chair. The stupid ceramic mug he insisted on using even though it had a crack down the side. All of it into the trash, one item at a time, like exorcising a ghost. I blocked him everywhere. Phone, email, social media, every single place he could try to reach me. I even called the gym where he used to work out and had them remove my emergency contact info from his account. I wanted no trace of him left in my life. No loose thread he could pull to find his way back in. There was no screaming match. No drawn-out apology. No dramatic gesture. Just silence. And in that silence, the weight of what he took sank in. Not just the money. The hours. The sleep. The emotional scaffolding I'd built around someone who saw me as convenient. The part of me that believed in potential. That rooted for someone even when the math didn't add up. That's what hurt. He didn't just lie. He made me believe I was building something with him. But all along, he was just using the blueprint to build something else, for someone else, with my name on the invoice. The collapse didn't happen all at once. It came in waves, like something far away at first, then closer, and then it hit me full force. After Logan left and the debt settled like cement around my neck, I tried to stay focused. I told myself I just needed to keep moving, to keep showing up at work, to keep pretending I was okay until I actually was. But the cracks were showing, and everyone noticed. I missed deadlines. I sent the wrong shipment numbers to the wrong vendors. I forgot a standing meeting with one of our biggest accounts. And every time I tried to explain, my voice would catch, or my hands would shake, and I'd have to step out of the office bathroom to breathe. 2 weeks later, I was called into HR. The meeting lasted 11 minutes. They thanked me for my time, said they were restructuring, but I knew it wasn't that. It was me. I had stopped being reliable. I was a liability with bags under my eyes and a bank account gasping for air. They handed me a severance envelope that wouldn't even cover half a month's rent and walked me out like I'd never existed. After that, everything unraveled fast. I went home and sat on the couch for hours, staring at the wall with the same pair of jeans folded on the armrest from the morning before. I stopped buying groceries. Rice became my entire diet. Rice with salt, rice with nothing. Sometimes I'd find a packet of soy sauce at the back of a drawer and feel like I was winning. The power got shut off a week into the next month. I missed the second notice because I hadn't opened my mail in days. I lit candles at night like I was pretending to be romantic with no one, just to see my own hands. I started selling things online, my old blender, a coffee maker, 3 coats, a pair of boots I used to love. Anything that wasn't nailed down or didn't make me cry to look at. I applied everywhere. Office jobs, warehouse shifts, customer service hellholes. I lowered my standards to the floor and still couldn't get hired. Too many applicants, too little experience in the wrong fields. The world had moved on while I'd been pouring everything into someone who treated me like a placeholder. One night, I checked my phone out of habit. A message popped up from an unknown number. It just said, "Hey, it's me. I know I probably shouldn't reach out, but Daria found out everything. It's been hell. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, waiting for my stomach to twist or my throat to close, but nothing happened. I felt nothing. Not sadness, not rage. Just a dull, quiet emptiness. He'd moved on, cheated, betrayed, lied, ruined my life, and now he wanted comfort. From me. Like I was supposed to be his backup plan again. I pressed the block button without typing a word. The room was quiet, the fridge off, the light gone, but in that moment, I felt more clear than I had in months. There was no one coming to save me. No miracle offer. No redemption arc. Just me, the dark, and what I could claw back from the edges. And even if there was nothing left to give, at least it was finally mine again. The eviction notice came on a Tuesday morning, taped to the inside of my building's front door like some sick reminder that everything I'd worked for was officially gone. I stood there in my slippers, holding a chipped mug of hot water, because I couldn't even afford tea, reading the words that confirmed what I already knew. I had 3 days left. Then I was out. I went back upstairs, sat on the floor of my dark apartment, and tried to decide what to pack. What to carry when you have nowhere to go. I started folding clothes into a trash bag when there was a knock at the door. It was my neighbor, Candace. We didn't talk much before. Just polite smiles and small talk in the hallway, maybe a compliment on each other's outfits. She was in her 60s, worked part-time at a bookstore, and always smelled like peppermint. That morning, she looked at me for a long second, then said, "You don't have to explain anything. I've been there." I didn't even ask how she knew. I just nodded. She said her cousin Rosalie had a spare room in her brownstone across town. Rosalie was private, quiet, didn't like drama. But she had space. and she had asked Candace to let her know if anyone decent needed a place to land. I didn't ask what decent meant. I just said yes. That afternoon, I packed the rest of my things in 2 garbage bags and a suitcase with a broken wheel. Candace drove me over in her old sedan. The heater barely worked, and the radio kept switching to static, but I didn't care. It was warm enough. It was going somewhere. Rosalie lived in a small but beautiful place near the edge of town, the kind of neighborhood where the trees were tall and the sidewalks didn't crack under your feet. She opened the door without smiling, without saying much. She had silver hair cut close to her head, and she wore an oversized cardigan that looked like it had stories of its own. She led me to the spare room and said only, "Rent's cheap. You help with groceries. I mind my business. You mind yours." That was it. No questions. No looks of pity. No reminders of how far I'd fallen. She paid everything in cash. She worked odd hours and came and went like clockwork. We rarely spoke beyond good morning and good night. But the silence wasn't cold. It was peaceful. I washed the dishes. She folded towels. We took turns sweeping the porch, coexisting like we'd always done it. We made it through the first month without me getting tossed onto the street. For the first time in what felt like forever, I went to sleep without a knot in my stomach. I had nothing, still, but I wasn't falling anymore. I wasn't scrambling. I wasn't alone in the dark. I sat on the windowsill one evening with a cheap blanket around my shoulders, listening to the sound of Rosalie's radio from the kitchen and breathing, really breathing, for the first time in months. It wasn't joy. Not yet. But it was something. A stillness. A beginning. A small, flickering light I hadn't felt in a long, long time. It was raining that morning. Not the soft kind of rain that makes you nostalgic, but the kind that soaks you in seconds and makes everything feel heavier than it already is. I had just stepped outside Rosalie's house to walk to the corner store when I saw him. Logan, standing at the edge of the sidewalk like he belonged there. Hands shoved in his pockets, hair wet, that same denim jacket clinging to his frame like a second skin. For a second I froze, too stunned to move. He looked thinner, older maybe, but the smile, God, the smile was the same. That lazy, crooked thing that used to disarm me before I knew better. "I just want to talk," he said. I didn't answer. I turned and ran. I didn't even think. I just started walking fast, then faster, then jogging until I reached the end of the block. I caught the first bus that came, didn't care where it was going. I sat near the back, still breathing hard, ignoring the water pooling at my feet. I stared out the fogged window and tried not to fall apart. He didn't follow me. He didn't try to call. But when I came back later that evening, I found them on the porch. A cheap bouquet from the grocery store, already starting to wilt. A tiny velvet box that snapped open to reveal a thin, dull ring that looked nothing like the one he'd put on Daria's finger. And a note, folded twice, left just beneath the flowers. It read, "I've changed. This ring was supposed to be yours. I'm sorry. I mean it. Just talk to me." I stood there in the doorway for a long time, holding that note in my hand, feeling absolutely nothing. Not anger. Not pain. Just a final, cold clarity. He still didn't get it. He thought this was about a ring. About some symbolic gesture of redemption. But it wasn't. It was about everything he tore down while pretending to build something. It was about how he watched me fall and turned away like it wasn't his mess. I dropped the flowers, the ring, and the note into the trash bin at the edge of the sidewalk. Then I pulled out my phone and sent the last message I would ever write to him. Forget me. Move on. And I meant it. Every word. It started with a flyer in the window of a pharmacy. I was picking up cold medicine for Rosalie. She'd caught something nasty and was too stubborn to admit it. And there it was, taped to the glass. Part-time front desk help wanted. 20 hours per week. No experience necessary. I took a photo of it without thinking, tucked it away in my phone like maybe just having the image would give me some kind of hope. That night, I sat at the little kitchen table with Rosalie silently sipping her tea, and I showed her the picture. She didn't say much, just nodded once and said, "Go in person. Don't email. People remember your face more than your name." So I did. The office was small, part of a larger medical complex that smelled like antiseptic and printer paper. A woman named Carla interviewed me right there in the break room, while sipping coffee from a mug that said nope. She asked if I could type, if I could be on time, if I was comfortable answering phones. I told her yes, and yes. She looked me up and down once, like she could see every crack in my past, and then she said, "You start Monday." It was only 20 hours a week, but it was steady. It was something. My first paycheck barely covered rent and groceries, but I didn't care. I walked out of that building with a folded schedule in my pocket and felt like I'd been handed a map back to the world. Slowly, the gears started to turn again. I set up a payment plan for my credit card. It was humiliating at first, explaining the charges, negotiating the minimums, hearing the customer service rep repeat terms like delinquent and high risk. But I didn't hang up. I stayed on the line, held the music, gave my routing number, and started chipping away. Bit by bit, dollar by dollar. My body started to follow. The headaches faded. The weight in my chest began to lift. I slept through the night for the first time in what felt like a year. I stopped flinching every time the mail arrived or my phone buzzed. Rosalie never asked questions. She never pried. But she showed up in other ways. She left tea outside my door when I worked late. She ironed my only interview blouse without saying a word. She made soup when my voice got hoarse from cold weather and too much talking. And one night, while we watched a rerun of some cooking show in the living room, she handed me a small envelope with a $20 bill inside and said, "For laundry." I know it piles up. I almost cried. That apartment, with its quiet corners and slow mornings, started to feel like something close to home. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving. I wasn't waking up wondering what else I'd lose. I was working. I was paying off what I owed. I was eating meals that didn't come from a microwave. I was laughing again, even if it was just at bad reality TV or Rosalie's dry one-liners about the neighbors. I didn't have much, but I had peace. I had a little dignity back. And more than anything, I had the feeling, quiet, persistent, that maybe I was finally building something of my own. Something real. Something mine. It had been 6 months since I last saw his face. 6 solid months of quiet, of rebuilding, of working late and folding laundry with Rosalie's music humming in the background. I had nearly forgotten what it felt like to brace myself every time someone knocked on the door. Until one day, he showed up again. I opened the front door, and there he was, Logan, standing a few feet back from the porch like he knew not to get too close. He looked cleaner than I remembered. A little thinner. The hair that used to stick out in every direction was cut short, his jacket replaced with a plain button-down and jeans that actually fit. He didn't smile. He didn't try to charm his way in. He just held out an envelope and a small box. "I'm not here to ask for anything," he said, his voice quiet. "I just wanted to return what I took. The ring. The money. You didn't deserve any of it, and I should have done this a long time ago." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I watched him like I was watching someone I used to know through glass. He glanced down, then back at me, and held the envelope out farther. "There's $1,500 in cash. I know it doesn't make up for it, but it's what I could put together. And the ring. The one I bought with your card. I don't want it. I don't want anything from that part of my life." I stepped forward and took the envelope without a word. I looked at the small box, then back at him. "I'm not waiting for your apology," I said. "You already took enough time from me." He nodded once. "I know. I just thought you deserved something back, even if it's late." That was it. No speech. No plea for redemption. Just him, standing in the rain with money and a ring he never should have had. He turned and walked away. I watched him until he disappeared down the street, the sound of his footsteps soft against the wet sidewalk. Inside, I counted the cash, $1,500, just like he said. I set it aside in an envelope marked emergency fund and felt a strange kind of relief. Not closure, not peace, but something close to balance. Then I opened the box. The ring was still there, dull and lifeless. A perfect symbol of everything false he had tried to build. I took it to a pawn shop the next morning. The man behind the counter examined it, checked the band, the stone, the setting. He offered $950 in cash. I didn't hesitate. I took the money, walked out, and didn't look back. Not at the ring. Not at the shop. Not at him. I went home, added the cash to the envelope, and slid it into the drawer next to my bed. Not because I needed it right then, but because next time the world tried to pull the floor out from under me, I'd have something waiting. Something mine. It's strange how life can feel like it's moving in slow motion when everything is falling apart, but when it starts to come together again, even in the smallest ways, it picks up speed. 6 months ago, I was sitting in the dark eating plain rice and counting the dollars in my pocket like they were lottery tickets. Now, I have a stable job at the medical office. I get regular hours. I know the people I work with, and for the first time in years, I don't wake up with a knot in my stomach before checking my bank balance. I found a new apartment last month. Nothing fancy, just a small place with 1 bedroom, chipped countertops, and a bathroom mirror that leans a little to the left. But it's mine. The lease is in my name. The key is on my own ring. I bought a second-hand couch from a woman who gave me a discount when I told her I'd just moved in. The place still smells faintly of someone else's life, but every day it becomes more mine. I've got savings now. Not much, but enough to sleep without worrying about the electric bill. Enough to cover a flat tire, a missed paycheck, an unexpected illness. That emergency envelope from Logan's visit? I haven't touched it. It's tucked in a drawer with the corners of the bills smooth flat, a quiet reminder of what I got through and what I'll never let happen again. Most of all, I don't check the door anymore. For months, I would double-check the lock every night, sometimes 3 or 4 times, Like I could keep the past out if I turned the deadbolt just right. But now, I lock it once, turn off the lights, and go to bed. I don't wait for footsteps. I don't brace myself for a knock. Because I'm not the same person anymore. I'm not the woman who gave everything and asked for scraps. I'm not the woman who mistook potential for promise. I'm not someone's backup plan, someone's wallet, someone's soft place to land after the damage was done. My life isn't about Logan. It's not about what he took or what he ruined. It's about me. It's about learning to start from nothing. About surviving things I didn't think I could and coming out the other side stronger, sharper, and finally free. Thanks for sticking with me through all of this.